Okay, so I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Anna for our second Campfire conversation. I met Anna 2.5 years ago. I was with Dan de Groot actually in Cape Town, and Anna was at a conference for Christian Camping Southern Africa, which Jono was running. Good to see you again, Jono. And we were just really impressed with the approach that Anna has to creation care.
Thank you, Mark. Let me just get this screen share thing going. Hold on a sec. Right. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. Well, thank you very much for asking me to talk to you today. It's kind of weird talking to a computer, isn't it? I'd much rather be with you all face to face and able to meet you. Many of you I don't even know yet. But being able to meet via technology in this way is so much better than nothing, isn't it? So it's great to be here with you this afternoon. Let me start off by introducing myself to you. I'm Anna, as Mark has said, and I'm married to Chris, and we have 3 boys who are 15, 12 and 10, and we live in South Africa at Philipscop Mountain Reserve. We use these cottages here to host camps and retreats, amongst other things. And we also run the property as a nature reserve. Chris, my husband, is a botanist and I'm a conservation biologist. And we're both really passionate about helping others to appreciate the beautiful world that we live in and caring for it. And the world we live in really does need care, doesn't it? Whichever part of the world you're from today, I'm sure you're all aware of environmental problems within your country and around the globe. 6 months ago, many of us were getting ready to travel to Australia for the global gathering. And while we were preparing, we were watching the news and seeing the awful news of these devastating fires that were ravaging across Australia at the time. And then, of course, our hearts went out to those in the Sydney area who suffered in the floods that followed the fires. Those of you who come from the UK have just been through one of the wettest winters on record and the wettest February on record. Some areas received over 300% of the normal rainfall for February in February 2020, and vast areas of the UK were flooded. And where I'm from, in near Cape Town in South Africa, we've just recently come out of a devastating drought. So this photo here, which I hope my cursor, can you see my cursor? Somebody nod, Mark nod, I can see, yeah, okay, thanks. So this photo here shows one of the main dams that supplies the city of Cape Town. Cape Town has 8 million residents, and you can see that in 2018, the dam that supplies the city was not very healthy. City residents were restricted to less than 50 litres of water per person per day. And to put that into some kind of context, in the UK, the average per person per day water use is about 150 litres. And it was suspected that the city was going to run out of water altogether. Fortunately, that didn't happen this time, but droughts are becoming more common. And if we look at the wider world, environmental problems are all around us. Climate change threatens to have a significant impact on all of us, wherever we live. Coral reefs are dying. It's estimated that there will be none left by the year 2100. Rainforests are being destroyed at a rate of an area the size of a football pitch every second. We're filling our oceans with plastic, 8 million tons a year of it, and that's killing over 1 million marine animals annually. And then the global species extinction rate has reached between 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than natural background rates, with up to 150 species going extinct every single day. Now, of course, we're all in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. You might be wondering what that's got to do with creation care. Well, the COVID-19 virus is a zoonotic virus. That means it's a virus that has jumped from animals to humans, and humans are not adapted to these kind of diseases. The source of COVID-19 is thought to be the wild animal markets in Wuhan in China. But as humankind, as we continue to destroy wildlife habitats around the world, the interface between humans and wildlife increases, and the chances of us picking up zoonotic diseases also increases. As the global climate warms, the opportunities for these diseases to spread rapidly also increases. Epidemiologists are therefore predicting that there are going to be more outbreaks of these kinds of viruses caused by zoonotic diseases. To quote one epidemiologist, as long as we keep making our remote spaces less remote, these kind of outbreaks are going to keep coming. Okay, so what should our response as Christians be to all of this, to environmental issues in general? Well, we are the ones who know the one who made this amazing world that we live in. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We know that the earth is the Lord's, it's not ours. We're simply stewards who are living in it. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Psalm 24, verse 1. And we also know that God has given us the responsibility as stewards to care for his world. In Genesis 2, verse 15, God says, the Lord God took the man, put him in the garden to work it and take care of it. I really hope that you have managed to watch my previous talk that was done for the virtual global gathering. In that talk, I covered some of the biblical background to creation care, and it's really important that we understand what the Bible has to say. It's far more important than anything that I would say. I concluded in that talk that caring for creation is a fundamental part of loving God and of loving our neighbours. The Bible must be our starting point. God doesn't want people who are shocked into action by frightening statistics or local crises. He wants hearts that love him and want to care for his world because we know that he made it, that he loves it, and that he has asked us to care for it. So if you have any questions on the theology behind creation care, or any questions at all following my previous talk, please feel free to ask those later on this afternoon. I'd be very happy to chat through those things. Let's get our theology straight so that we're ready to take action for the right reasons, with hearts that really want to love God and love our neighbours through caring for his world. But for the moment, can we just assume that we're all on the same page theologically? That we're all at the place where we might say, surely Christians should be at the forefront of conservation and of caring for the planet. So the next question following that has to be, well, what can I do? Where do I start? Where do I start as an individual? And what does this have to do with camp ministry? Well, first of all, I would say, start small. Don't aim to change everything in your life all at once. You'll quickly become overwhelmed and easily give up. Start prayerfully. Ask God to show you what he wants you to be doing, first of all, and then get used to incorporating that new behavior pattern into your life, and then continue praying and ask him, what shall I tackle next? And also start praying about global environmental issues. Ask God to help government policymakers and conservationists to make the right choices. As you take steps to care for God's planet, remember to do so as an act of worship. Don't forget that worship is not just what we do when we meet together as Christians and when we sing. Worship is actually how we live 24/7. It's the choices we make when we get up in the morning, when we hop in the shower, when we get dressed, when we go shopping, cook dinner, and in every area of our lives. I really believe that as we begin to say no to indifference towards the planet and take small but tangible actions in the direction of deliberately caring for God's world, that God begins to change us. So allow him to do that one step at a time. We've already said that the Bible must be our starting point. So keep on studying the Bible and see what it has to say about creation care. Perhaps you might find yourself reading it differently to the way you have in the past as you consider these things. And allow God to transform your minds and then to show you what his will is in this area. Paul says in Corinthians that whatever we do, whether we're eating or drinking, we should be doing it all for the glory of God. And this is a really helpful verse when it comes to creation care, because a lot of it comes down to the basic choices of what will we eat, or what will we drink, or where will we shop, and so on. So let's be thinking, how can we make those choices in a way that glorifies God? Christian conservation organisation A Rocha has coined the phrase living lightly, and I think it's really helpful, because we can't stop eating and drinking and using power and travelling around. We can't stop all those things, but we do need to be questioning how we do them and aiming to do them in a way that causes minimal negative impact to the planet and to God's creation. Okay, so how are we going to think about starting to implement all this within camp ministry? How can we live lightly and actively care for God's creation as we run our camps? Last year, I spoke on this subject at South Africa's Christian Camping Conference. And after the conference, I really didn't want it just to be an interesting talk that people thought, wow, that was interesting. And then they went back to their camps and nothing really changed. So I wanted to see if I could start something that would help people to care for God's creation within the camp setting. And from that, the concept of eco-camp was born. The eco-camp scheme is modelled on eco-church, which is a thriving conservation initiative in England that encourages creation care within church ministry. There are now over 3,000 participating churches in the UK. The scheme works via an online questionnaire, and the eco-camp questionnaire covers 5 key aspects of camp life. The idea is that the questionnaire gives lots of ideas of actions that can be taken to improve creation care within your camp, and that as you take actions, those would be rewarded by eco-camp awards to spur people on. EcoCamp's aim is not to make people feel bad about what they're not doing yet in terms of caring for God's creation, but to encourage people to get involved in creation care and to celebrate every step that people take towards environmentally friendly practices. So let's run through these 5 areas of camp life and consider ways that we might be able to implement creation care within our camp in these 5 different areas. So first of all, worship and teaching. Do people who visit your campsites have opportunities to worship God outdoors, surrounded by his creation when they come? There's something about being outdoors that brings a new dimension to our worship and a new appreciation of God's creation and of our creator God. The start of creation care is actually appreciation of God's creation. So it's really great to get people outside and really looking at what God has made, looking at the creation. What about introducing some environmental education sessions into your camp? As people around the globe become more and more aware of the environmental crisis facing our planet, there is going to be a greater demand for environmental education. And you'll not only be honouring God by pointing your campers to the wonders of God's creation, but you'll also have opportunities to share your faith and the reasons for why you care for creation as you run these kinds of sessions. Christians often believe that we should be focusing on evangelism as opposed to creation care, as if these were 2 separate alternative things. But it's not true. They're not separate things. They should be seen as going together. They are in fact fundamentally linked. If you want to reach those people that come on your camp who are aware that our environment is in trouble, and they also know that you're a Christian and that you believe God created the world, if they see that you are indifferent to caring for his creation, they're not going to want to have anything to do with Christ. You'll damage your witness to those people by not caring for God's creation. So let's see evangelism and caring for God's creation as going together, as supporting one another. And as we care for the environment, we'll find that opportunities arise to point people to the Creator. But of course, we can't just point people to the Creator and tell people about looking after God's world. We actually need to be doing something ourselves, because otherwise people will see us as hypocrites. If we tell people that come on our camps that they should care for the planet, and then they see the way we run the campsite doesn't care for the planet at all, they will just see us as hypocrites. So let's be thinking about how we can run our campsites in ways that honour God in the area of caring for his creation. So we'll need to be asking questions like, how can we run our campsite in a way that reduces our carbon footprint? We might want to think about insulating our buildings to reduce the need for heating or air conditioning. We might consider installing solar geysers like this one to heat our water so that we don't need to use electricity or gas to heat our water. Or perhaps you are in the position to install solar power. Or maybe you live in a part of the world where you can switch to a green energy supplier. We'll want to consider basic things like our lightings. Are we using energy-saving light bulbs? And are we reminding people to switch off the lights when they're not needed? It's time to recognise that water is not an unlimited resource, and also that the more water we use, the more we contribute towards global climate change. For the vast majority of us, the water we use comes from our municipality, and it's been cleaned via processes that use energy and contribute to greenhouse gases. So reducing our water usage is really important for us as individuals and as camps. You might want to find some signage and put up signage to help people think about ways that they can save water. Simple things like don't have the tap running while you're brushing your teeth. And just reminding people, water is precious, and to look after it. We also might want to introduce water butts to catch our rainwater from the roofs, and use that water to water gardens and so on. And let's not forget about seeking to avoid polluting our water through the way we clean our campsites. Let's be seeking to use environmentally friendly cleaning products wherever we can so that we reduce pollution. How do you decide what the menu for your camp should be? On the basis of cost or practicality or what the kids will eat? We perhaps need to be thinking about the planet too when we make these decisions. Reducing meat consumption is one of the key ways that we can save water, reduce our carbon footprint, and care for the planet. Why not consider introducing a vegetarian day on all of your camps and explaining to your campers while you're doing this? I know that the concept of having a vegetarian day will be easier in some parts of the world than others, and South Africa is definitely a country where it's not easy at all. South Africa is a big meat-eating nation. But being countercultural gives us amazing opportunities to share the gospel, to tell people why we're doing this and the reasons behind it, and bring it all back to God being the one that is, the planet is the Lord's, and we're here to look after it, to care for it, and to honour God in the way that we even choose what we eat. We also need to think about how we shop, seeking to buy things that are local products and haven't travelled from far away so that we reduce our food miles, considering packaging, seeking to reduce single-use plastic bag use and say no to plastic straws, and so on. And introducing recycling facilities in our camps will be a really good thing for everybody to be aiming for. Obviously, once again, that's much easier in some parts of the world than in others, but it's a good thing to be aiming for. One of the huge problems in the world today at the moment is that of plastic pollution. As I said earlier, at the moment we are sending 8 million tons of plastic pollution into the ocean every year, and we're damaging our oceans, we're damaging the creatures in our oceans. We found at Phillips COP that a great way to reduce our plastic waste is to make Ecobricks. Ecobricks are plastic bottles filled with plastic. So this is a 2-litre bottle, and into a 2-litre bottle you can stuff 650 grams of clean and dry flexible plastic waste. So sweet wrappers, crisp wrappers, the packaging from your cereal packets, your pasta packets, rice packets, and so on. And All this stuff that would be ending up on landfill can be stuffed into the Ecobricks. We make stools with ours. You can see my boys sitting on some of our stools there. And we have Ecobrick making stations in every cottage so that guests who are staying here can make Ecobricks whilst they're here instead of throwing their plastic into the bin. We've also found that holding Ecobrick making sessions with small groups is a really lovely thing to do. It gives us opportunities to chat while we're doing something productive, and to not only chat about why we're stuffing Ecobricks, but to find out more about the people around us. And again, that can lead to gospel opportunities. Perhaps you run a really big campsite and you're thinking this would be really impractical on our campsite. But we do eco-bricking with our staff as well, and perhaps that would be an opportunity for you. Through doing eco-brick making sessions with our staff, we've been able to teach them about the world and why throwing away plastic onto the street is not a good idea, and enable them to take that message back into their communities. Many of us are privileged to live on campsites that are in beautiful settings with large plots of land that we're responsible for. So let's seek to steward that land for the glory of God. And why not incorporate caring for the land into the activities that we offer groups that come to our campsites? At Phillipscott, we've found that groups love clearing aliens. Now, aliens are plants that are growing here, but they don't come from South Africa, and they don't belong here, and they're doing damage to the native flora. And here, all these photos are groups of people clearing aliens on our reserve. And they really enjoy it. It's an activity that people really enjoy. And kids also enjoy pond clearing and pond management, especially on hot days. At our last campfire conversation, we were privileged to enjoy listening to Bruce Denning talking about the God of adventure and sharing with us the core concepts of Christian adventure that encourage participants to move closer to God. Adventure in camp ministry is often outdoors, amongst creation, so why not think of ways to incorporate adventure that contributes towards the care of creation? I used to work in an outdoor centre in the UK, and one of the highlights for many of the inner city London kids that came to our camp was the night hike. They'd never been out at night without street lamps, and walking through the woods in the dark was scary and exciting and an amazing adventure. Now, here in South Africa, my family and I last year got involved in a chameleon monitoring project. The chameleons are easiest to find at night. They climb up the vegetation and they shine in the torchlight. It's an amazing adventure for kids to go out after dark and hunt for chameleons. And with the guidance of a local scientist who's studying chameleons, we were able to contribute useful data to her project. That's something known as citizen science, using unskilled citizens to contribute towards wildlife monitoring of populations or collecting data for science. And if we can contribute to science in this way whilst providing amazing adventures for our campers, we have a win-win situation, don't we? To find a suitable project for your area, you'll obviously need to team up with some local scientists and ask them what kind of data kids on your camp could contribute towards collecting for them. You'll be surprised at the options that might be available and about how much people get excited by contributing towards a project like this. So perhaps you might find that you can combine a hike or kayaking trips with wildlife monitoring of some kind. Or if not wildlife monitoring, you could at least think about doing a litter pick while you do your hike or kayaking trip. Perhaps you could incorporate some kind of habitat management challenge into your program. When I was working in the outdoor centre in the UK, I found that children shone and were challenged very differently by different activities. So those kids that found the ropes course and the climbing tower really easy, they weren't frightened at all and they just loved it, and it was all easy for them. They might find that they're more challenged by being patient enough to keep going with a river survey. whereas the ones that were terrified on the climbing tower and the ropes course might come into their own in the river survey and be able to help the ones that are now struggling with patience or struggling to identify the freshwater invertebrates. Having a wider range of activities in your program will not only add value to your program in terms of environmental conservation, but in terms of gospel opportunities, it will create new opportunities as you debrief groups and chat to individuals after the different range of activities. So, where do we go from here? We've seen that the Bible calls us to care for God's creation, so it's time to take action. Caring for creation is an integral part of loving God and loving our neighbours, and therefore it should surely be an integral part of camp ministry. You may want to try to link up with A Rocha in your area. A Rocha is an international Christian conservation organisation, and there aren't many Christian conservation organisations out there, but that may not be possible for everyone. So I think it would be really great if within CCI we were encouraging one another to develop a concept of creation care within our camps. I'm sure many of you are already doing a fantastic job of caring for creation in your setting. So perhaps you guys could be sharing for us what works for you and what you've tried out and how things are going. I was planning at the global gathering in Sydney to try and meet up with people one-on-one and ask people to fill in the EcoCamp questionnaire that I've put together so that I could see how it worked in different countries' settings. Whether it could be used across the board within CCI or whether it really is only suitable for a Southern African setting. If you would be willing to help me with that and take the time to fill in a questionnaire, then please email me after this talk. The questionnaire takes about 30 minutes to fill in and it's online, and I can email you the link, and it would be really helpful to have a range of countries' responses and thoughts from you on what would be helpful for the way forwards. It is a pity that we can't meet face to face and discuss what we do next and what the way forwards is for creation care within CCI. But it's my prayer that together we will find a way forwards so that CCI becomes not only an amazing organisation for effective camp ministry, but that it will also be known for a brilliant camp ministry organisation that is caring for God's creation. I believe that within camp ministry, we have incredible opportunities to actively care for God's world, and that through creation care, new opportunities will arise to share God's love and the good news of the gospel so that more people will be encouraged to say yes to God. So together, let's care for God's world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna, for that very thought-provoking and extremely well communicated presentation. It's been wonderful to hear it, and we really appreciate it. If people are happy to fill in the questionnaire for Anna subsequent to this, then please do drop her an email. I know how she'd be really encouraged if you were to do that, and it would also give her some perspective from around the world. If we can have it from multiple continents, I know that would be something that she'd find particularly helpful. Okay, so Anna, let's just maybe I can ask people to pose their own questions. So Colin, you were asking a theology question. Why don't you post your question? Why don't you pose it yourself?
Okay, Anna, Sally McFay was, I believe, a late Canadian. She unfortunately died, but she wrote quite a few books about creation care and the necessity of extending the golden rule to include all of nature. And I just wondered if she'd had any impact on you.
I'm afraid I've never heard of her, so no, I'm afraid she didn't.
Well,
she sounds interesting though. I'd like to read her books, but
definitely
no,
try to
I've
get
never
a hold
heard
of
of
one of her books.
Okay, thanks, Colin. That's helpful. So that's a good, and the name's in the chat if anyone wants to follow that one up. So Mazai, you're obviously intrigued by these plastic bricks. Did you want to ask Anna a question about the use of them and how they put together, Mazai?
Yeah, hi, hello.
Hi.
So I was really curious by it, and also wanted to know if you have like another idea of like reusing stuff, because that's pretty cool.
You're talking about the Ecobricks. They are a way of reusing plastic bottles, and you stuff them with plastic, so you're dealing with a lot of plastic that would end up on landfill. As I say, we make stools with ours. So 7 round bottles make a stool, or 9 square bottles make a stool. But some people even build houses with Ecobricks. So it would be worth finding out about Ecobrick projects in your area, because you could just make the bricks and contribute them to an Ecobrick project, or you could make them and stick them together and make stools for your campsite. The sticking them together is very straightforward. You use silicone sealant, and yeah, it's very straightforward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I did have to smile when you mentioned about the concept of a vegetarian day, and all the South Africans at that point looked a bit aghast, actually.
Yeah, I mentioned that in my talk last year, and it didn't go down well at all. But yeah. But like I say, being countercultural sometimes gives you the best conversation opportunities.
Absolutely, no, that's good. So John Paul, you've asked more of a theology question, but John Paul, do you want to just put that question yourself to Anna, please?
Yes, thank you for a wonderful. The usual understanding of a Christian care from a Christian perspective is that man has been put over dominion over all the creation, and finally what he did, he didn't do a good job, and that's why we are in such a mess. But is that approach right? Or is it to understand that in the entire original sin that not just the humans but the creation around us also fell, and that's why we see all these calamities and all these problems that we face? Is that perspective right? Because I think the first one is a little more critical and may not help. I've tried to, even I'm trying to do a research on Indian perspective on Christian care, on creation care through camps, but it's very hard to get into minds of people if we go up with the first approach. But I would really love you to kind of correct me, or give more emphasis on which should I be the better one.
Am I understanding you that you're saying that one approach is that people say that humans are responsible for the mess that the planet is in because of the way we live, and the other approach is that creation is fallen along with us, and that's the foundation of, yeah, okay. I think the two overlap, to be quite honest with you. I think that that yes, creation is fallen. We know from Genesis chapter 3 that creation was part of the fall, and from Romans chapter 8 it says that creation is groaning because of the fall, and it's waiting for redemption along with the rest of us. We're also waiting for redemption. So creation is definitely part of the fall, but the fall was because of mankind's sinfulness, and we're still sinful today. And a lot of environmental problems around the planet, you can see them, you can trace them very easily back to human sin, to our greed, our want to have more stuff and to want to have it now. And that is the foundation of a lot of environmental problems. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So I think the two are very much linked. The origin is the fall, but the outworking of that goes on today.
Is that okay, John Paul? Is that helpful?
Thank you so much. It was a really good explanation of what I asked. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. It was interesting. I was at the 3CA conference in Orlando in December with some of you, and they gave us all straws, actually, metal straws. First time I've ever seen one. And I know Peter Modern's made a comment here that his camps have moved to metal. Is that right, Peter?
That's exactly what I meant. It's www.strawies.com. You can order them. We changed from plastic all to rust-free metal, and they're dishwasher-proof. It's awesome. Kids love them.
Fantastic.
Thank you. So back to the vegetarian side of things again. You've obviously struck a bit of a raw nerve there. So Aaron Zibath in Joel in the States has said, have you seen a campsite implement a vegetarian day, actually do it? And what benefits have resulted? VN's putting a hand up, so maybe she wants to chip in at that point.
We at Rocklands, in Siam, where we are, where I used to be, we had a large Muslim camping school groups that were more than 50% Muslim. And we researched, so not from an environmental impact, but just from a not making an argument. We wanted to get it away from being a religious issue, what we eat, to just being simple. And vegetarian options definitely reduced stress around not having to cross as many bridges about how food had been prepared and so on. So we had great success. We would have maybe a camp where we would have the main meals would be vegetarian, and we had a great lady on board who was really researching meals that weren't. The problem with vegetarian meals, I think for me as a South African, is that generally it just looks really boring. We're not used to the concept of not having animal products as part of our meals. It's just a thing. I love meat, but I've learned to appreciate and value the strides forward that have been made, particularly around special needs eating. So not environmental, but it's come from a different angle and has been beneficial to us. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's good. I think, Norman, you've done the same at CYE, yeah?
Yes, we did that partly as an example, and yeah, it cut our costs down a little bit too in terms of using vegetarian instead of meat, and it was quite well received in a conversation piece.
Thank you. That's helpful. Now, I said on the chat at the moment, is there anyone who'd like to if you just want to raise a hand, and or if it's quiet, then kick in with a question, then Ruth in India, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we do a lot of camps for underprivileged kids, and most of them barely have 3 meals a day. So a non-vegetarian camp is exciting for them, it's special, and it actually carries an element of love, for our campers. So how then would you try to get them thinking about that when, getting a non-veg meal is rare?
Yeah, I think all our settings are so different, and living in South Africa at the moment, I'm surrounded by a culture that, as Bian says, most people expect meat with pretty much every meal. So to introduce one day of a camp that's vegetarian is a bit of a shock to people's system, and it will create talking opportunities and so on. And it will just start a culture of thinking about eating without meat. Whereas you're talking about kids that eat without meat all the time, and you wanting to share Christ's love with them by giving them something that they don't normally get. So I think, that's fantastic. Keep going, and perhaps talk to them about the fact that you can't normally do this, but that's great because vegetarian eating is good for our planet, and you don't want to say what we're doing is directly bad for our planet. And there isn't anything, I'm not saying everybody should become vegetarians, I'm just saying that we should be cutting back on the amount of meat we eat. And it's really those in the Western kind of cultures, like UK, US, South Africa, who eat vast amounts of meat that need to be cutting back on our meat consumption. Whereas you guys, particularly these campers that you're talking about, they don't need to cut back on their meat consumption because they're having so little. So keep sharing Christ's love with them.
Thank you. Jono, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think from the angle of creation care and looking after the environment and vegetarian day, I think that's a really, really good idea. And I think once we start going into other theological reasons why we shouldn't eat meat, it can be very dangerous if you're doing church camps or Christian camps. So I saw there was a note there. You could talk about the Daniel diet, but then you're pushing a certain part or a certain aspect of theology that certain camps or certain denominations might not agree with, So coming from the environmental side, that aspect, and really talking through the creation care part, I think is really the way to go. Also, obviously, vegetarian food that is really good and tasty and is surprising to people who usually eat meat, who wouldn't naturally choose a vegetarian meal at a restaurant, and now they've got a vegetarian meal that tastes great. It then adds a great talking point for creation care and that conversation.
Thank you, Jono. Anybody else would like to, we've got just a few minutes left. If anyone else would like to put a question to Anna on this subject, then shoot.
Yes, I have a question.
Hey, please. Peter.
Anna, as I just mentioned, the metal straws, what, and you made benches out of plastic. You've been along the way for many years already. Even though we're Dutch eco-friendly citizens. But are there other tips that you would see as a chance of quickly changing the course of lower the plastic, but and also be better for the environment? Do you have other tips that you have gathered around the world?
I think around the world things vary so much, and actually in Europe you are in many ways further ahead than we are in South Africa. In South Africa, plastic bottles are everywhere, and people don't think about it, they just buy them and buy some more. And the cutting down on plastic hasn't really come into South African culture in a big way yet. Whereas in Europe, I'm originally from England, so I kind of have two hats on. I have the perspective from both countries. In England and Europe, there's much more of a culture of cutting back on these things and recycling and looking for alternatives. So I think you need to start with where your country's at and move on from there. And that's why I didn't want to be too specific in this talk about tips, because we represent so many different nations that where your nation is at is going to be very different from where we're at here in South Africa. And we need to really start where we're at and then celebrate the progress that we can each make from where we're at, rather than feeling bad because we're further behind you, or feeling superior or whatever. So I couldn't really say for your setting. But yeah, I think being in touch with local conservation organizations, AROSH is a Christian conservation organization, but I think it's helpful for us also to be listening to local conservation organizations that are non-Christian as well, just to get those practical tips. They will be able to provide a lot of practical tips and ideas. And obviously we want to be doing and implementing those ideas because of our love of God, but the ideas don't change. The tips don't change. So yeah, so look around and see what people are doing in your area.
Lisa.
In CCI Latin America, one of the projects that we're going to be entering into in 2021 is creating a collection of camp activities to encourage exploration of God's creation. We kind of have to start back a little bit in terms of a very urban population to even grow an appreciation. So we're going to be basing it on flow learning, Joseph Cornell's flow learning, sharing nature with children, which is probably the easiest thing. He's a very strong environmentalist and from the west coast of the USA, but he has a 4-step approach for campers that I've never seen anything better. And each of the 4 facets have like an activity. So you awaken enthusiasm with some, outdoor activity, and then you begin to focus your attention on whatever ants or trees or leaves or whatever particular thing you're going to focus on. And then you have a direct experience with it where you literally are rolling in it, touching it, using the 5 senses to observe or experiencing it. And then the last step is sharing your inspiration. And as Christians, that's where we would bring in the whole biblical facet of, how it reflects God's character. So the thing is that we want to create about an encyclopedia with about 100 activities that could be eventually on an app, so that if you're out in the beach or something and you're like, okay, I got seashells, you guys have something that I can, use with the campers to, look at seashells, or if you're in the forest, pine cones, or, you know, wherever you're at, so that it's searchable in Spanish, obviously. But we're actually doing the project with new and developing writers. So we're hoping we have a secret agenda to not just create a tool, but also to develop Latin American national writers. But what your creation care presentation did for me right now is to kind of broaden it beyond. I particularly like the part where you're talking about worshiping outdoors. And we have people who are like, they don't even want to go on a pathway. Like, they're so city oriented. They're like, no, we have to worship, and there has to be a full band, and they don't want to be outside. But to get them, I loved your point about worshiping outside, outdoors, which would appeal, you know, for the adult population as well. So it just kind of spurred me to think beyond just the practical, how to get the kids grow in their appreciation, to some of your other, you know, your 5 points of this creation care in the practice, the eco camp. So it's kind of made me go, okay, we can broaden the scope of this, you know, encyclopedia to include those ideas as well, which are not a specific activity per se, but, you know, have to do with operations and worship and teaching. So thank you for kind of broadening the scope there for me.
Thank you. That sounds amazing. I'd love you to share the I can't remember the name you said.
Oh,
but,
I'll put it in the chat,
yeah,
for sure. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, time for one more question if we have anybody. Dan DeGroat from Texas.
I was just going to offer, Anna, thank you so much. My university degree is in biology as well. And it's a wonderful blend with camping ministry. So I appreciate what you've had to say. And I think as we speak about creation care, it is a wonderful opportunity for the gospel even woven into that, because we learn about creation from God's word. And what an opportunity to go to the book of Genesis and see, as it says in the prophet says, look into the heavens and see who has created these stars. It doesn't say look up and see the stars. There's a who behind everything that there is. And what an opportunity to soak this concept with the who behind the what. And we talk about the stars, we talk about caring for them, being a good steward. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to bring in the book of Genesis, and that God did create these things. It didn't happen by chance. And it's a perfect lead in. Once they begin to appreciate, then we can say, well, let's talk about where this came from, and the God that made this made you and loves you, and then the gospel is a very natural fit in that process.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, our Lord Jesus used his creation to point people to truths about God. He said, look at the birds and look at the flowers of the field. And so why don't we do that? As people involved in camp ministry, we love to be outdoors. Let's use what's out there to point people to God. And you've just got to look at the intricacy of everything out there to give you opportunities to just say, wow, what an amazing God we serve. So, yeah.
Well, you couldn't end on a higher note than that. Thanks for leading us into that one, Dan, and thanks for that response there, Anna. I think it's been an extraordinary hour again, and thank you once again, Anna, for leading us today.